welcome everyone to another NJ Thrives Thursday. We have a few people in here, but it's 12 p.m. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm your host, Christian Pichardo, NJSBDC Marketing Consultant and CEO at NelumaMedia.com. And as always, NJSBDC is a statewide program powered by the SBA and partners. And we help small businesses with no-cost small business consulting, training and events starting at $0 like this one, and exclusive small business resources only available to clients. So we have a couple headlines. Some of them are you've seen in previous weeks. Nothing new or extravagant this week. Then we'll hop into the webinar and Q&A session around the end. So as for the small business headlines, I've been talking about the NJEDA Small Business Lease Grant Program for a while now. So this is the page where you'll be able to, see if you're eligible and how to apply. So there you have that. They are still accepting applications, by the way. They have not posted whether they've closed it or funds are ran out or anything like that. So there's that. And you also have SBA disaster loans. So the SBA disaster loans, they break them up to a few different types. So you have home, personal property, business, physical disaster, economic injury disaster, military reservist economic injury loans. So these are probably the most suitable for a small business. So the physical disaster ones, and these are mostly for people affected by the tropical storms that happened not too long ago. And the economic injury ones are more related to COVID, but really I think these apply to any economic injury you might be facing. So there you have it. Those are two big ones. And again, the NJSBDC has a dedicated team of our top finance experts, and they can help you get funding. So basically the team has over 100 years of collective experience. They've helped 10,000 plus small businesses and over $1 billion in funding. This is, of course, another service that is at no cost. It's a team of our consultants. Just make sure if you are requesting for the capital team that you have at least 2+ years in business. You must have at least 2+ years in business. So those are this week's headlines. 3 things to keep in mind before our webinar. Type in your questions into the Q&A box below. You have a little toolbar on the bottom of your window. It'll say Q&A. Go in there. You can ask questions as yourself or anonymously. And if they're there, they're easier to find in the chat. We just have a long conversation, so we might miss your question. So number 2 is complete the 3-minute survey. So once the webinar is done, you're going to get redirected to a survey, and then you'll get access to the recording and materials of this webinar. And 3, just by attending, you're going to be eligible for the Upgrade Your Business certificate. Please let us know if you have any questions on that. More information at the link below. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Tim Peter. You haven't been on in a little while. We missed you.
Good to see you, Christian. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well.
Awesome. So on this webinar, we're going to learn how to avoid huge small business mistakes in terms of e-commerce. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let you get the show on the road.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. Great to see everybody today. So we're just going to dive right in. There is a lot to talk about. And I want to start with a quick story. The other day, my wife and I were traveling and we wanted to get some dinner. And we did a search on Google to see what restaurants were around. And you'll note, and I want to be very clear, I did this screenshot deliberately to protect the guilty. So we were not in New Brunswick. But you'll note we have things here that say order online. And we had questions. We clicked on the order online button. One thing led to another. We couldn't get questions answered about the food we were looking for. We couldn't pay when we wanted to pay because the credit card we used was not accepted, or they claimed they took Google Pay, but it didn't work. And the net result was we couldn't order from the restaurant we wanted. We ended up getting a pizza, which nothing against pizza. I love pizza as much as anybody. But they'd set an expectation and then couldn't deliver on the expectation and consequently lost a sale. The other thing to be aware was this was happening at about 8 o'clock on a Friday night. And so I can guarantee we were not the only people having these problems. They did something very, very straightforward. They were trying to do something to make it easy for their guests, but it didn't work. And they lost business because of it. And so what I want to talk to you today is how to make sure you're not those folks. You want to make sure that, your guests and your customers aren't people who are going to find themselves saying, well, the hell with it, we'll just get a pizza, right? So that's kind of what we're looking for today, all right? So let's talk about a series of errors that we see all the time with small business e-commerce and how you can avoid them, what you need to do to ensure that your small business website, your small business content, the customer experience that you provide encourages customers to choose you, to buy from you, and to come back to you again and again and again, instead of choosing your competition, okay? So first mistake, the biggest one, and this might seem obvious, but we see it all the time, that you don't have a website. And when I say you, I don't mean you specifically. I'm sure you have a website, but the other folks. Many people choose to create something on Facebook, or they choose to create something on LinkedIn, or they choose to create something on Instagram instead of having a website of their own. And this is an enormous mistake. So much so that I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but just to say there are some great tools out there that allow you to have a website. WordPress.com, terrific all-around website builder. It's a better tool if you don't need a shopping cart, but it's relatively low cost. It's relatively simple to set up. And because there are lots of people who are familiar with it, lots of developers, lots of designers, as your company grows, it can scale up with you and you can get support from people who know the environment really well. Now, if you do sell things online, you do require a shopping cart, Shopify.com, another great option, relatively low cost, relatively simple to set up, and again, can scale as you grow because it's a well-known ecosystem out there. There are others. Feel free to look at competitors. I just happen to like these, particularly because of that last item, which is as you grow, there are people who can help you. So you have to have a website. It's important. But since I started by saying, there are people who are on Facebook, or as the example I gave a moment ago of trying to get some food, of using just Google local search, the Google My Business page. Why don't we just use one of these? I mean, these are cheaper, they're fast, they're easy to set up. So why don't you just use one of these? Well, there are lots of reasons. One is they're the new gatekeepers. They decide who comes to you and who doesn't. So for instance, Google My Business can be a great place to list your business. And I don't want to suggest you shouldn't have a Google My Business page. But if it's all you have and Google decides tomorrow that they want to show someone else in the search results first, suddenly your business can decline and there's nothing much you can do about that. The same with Facebook. They can change the rules in terms of who you get to present your content in front of it. The same with any of these. There is an old expression in marketing of don't build your brand on rented land. Now, that doesn't mean you don't use rented land to reach customers where they are. It means that you also have to have a place where they can come that you fully control. That's one of the reasons why you need a website. That's one of the reasons why it's so important. The other reason is because increasingly they're making it hard for you to get your content and your message in front of customers without you paying more for it. They're the gatekeepers. They're the toll collectors. They run the turnpike and they get to set the toll levels at whatever they want. And increasingly, when you want to reach more people, it's going to cost you more money over the long term. So do be aware of that. It's a great place to find somebody you can't find on your own, but then give them a way to come to you directly. Now, if any of this sounds a little paranoid or like I'm making this out to be, these guys are bad guys or something, I'm not. It's also true that they've said out loud, this is Bill Reddy, who's the president of e-commerce, payments, and next billion users at Google. Think of Google as the connector between you and your evolving customer base. With all due respect to Bill, how about no? I don't want anyone to be between me and my customer base. You don't want anyone to be between you and your customer base. They exist. They're a great place to get introduced to customers, but then you want to be the person connected directly to your customers every chance you get. And we know that this is something that is somewhat problematic over the long term because former Amazon CEO and current space cowboy Jeff Bezos has said, your margin is my opportunity. If you are making profit, if you are making revenue from these tools, he has said out loud, I want my cut. Where's my piece? Which, good for Jeff, helps him build rocket ships and things like that. But is that ultimately good for your business? The last reason we want to be very conscious about this is because it's also where your competition lives. If someone goes to Google, if someone goes to Facebook, if someone goes to LinkedIn, if someone goes to Uber Eats, if someone goes to DoorDash, they don't just see you, they see the alternatives. So the biggest risk to you of using these tools exclusively is not that your customer is going to choose you and it's going to cost you too much. It's that they're going to choose someone else altogether, much like I did the other night when I ordered a pizza. So it's not that you don't want to use them. It's that you want to use them the right way. You want to make sure you're using these to reach customers where they are. You're using all of these tools collectively to reach customers where they are in something we refer to as a hub and spoke model, where your website and your email list sit at the center. They're the hub. They're the thing you control. And then you can use the spokes, the various elements out here, whether it's Google My Business or Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, other third-party sites, things that come down the road in the future, TikTok, whatever it happens to be, all good ways to reach customers, but you're going to drive those customers back to assets you control, and you're going to use the spokes to put content and messages and offers and connect with customers with places that have lots of reach. So it's always this balance of finding the places where you can be that help you reach new customers and giving them a place that you control where they can go, the hub that always comes back to you. It also doesn't mean you have to do all of these. I always encourage small business owners to focus their efforts. So start with just a couple, see what works for you, and then you can expand from there. If you sell to consumers, you're in a B2C business, you have to have a website, you have to have an email list, and then maybe you test a Facebook or an Instagram and a Google My Business listing if you have a physical location to find new customers. And if those work for you, then you can expand to some additional ideas. If you sell to businesses, same thing. You got to have a website, you got to have an email list, but instead of Facebook or Instagram, maybe you look at LinkedIn. And again, if you have a physical location, make sure you have a Google My Business listing. So we're not going to build our brand on rented land. We're going to use rented land as a spoke and use it to drive customers back to our hub so we can connect with them directly. Now, I mentioned Google My Business. Google My Business is incredibly important. I don't want to undermine what I just said about having a website, because you must have a website. But you also want to look at having a Google My Business because of the value of local search. If you had a physical location, we know that most searches today happen on mobile devices, whether the customer is out and about or whether they're sitting on their couch, they are using their mobile phone as the place where they search. We know that about half of all mobile searchers visit a store or location within the same day. We know that about half of local searchers on mobile are looking for things like a local business address. Spoiler alert, we're going to come back to that in a little bit. And we know that about 3/4 of local-based searches on a mobile device end in purchases being made offline. So when we talk about e-commerce, I think most people think about things like Amazon, where we look up a specific product, we place it in a cart, we then go ahead and give us our credit card, and the item is shipped to us. While that is certainly an element of e-commerce, it's actually not how most mobile searches work. Most mobile searches say, I want to come in and pick it up. Or if people are concerned about health and safety and the situation with the pandemic, I want curbside pickup, where I want to drive up in front of your building and have someone bring it out to my car, maybe put it in the trunk. Maybe it's something that I want it to be delivered to me. But the purchase may not happen directly through the website, or it may happen through the website, but is fulfilled off-site. It's fulfilled in real life. So be aware that e-commerce is all of the connections that the customer has using digital assets and using digital tools to reach your business and for your business to reach them. So you have to think about how you put these together in a way that actually works for your customers. Google My Business also gives customers local information in Google search and helps you find information out, such as what are the things that customers are searching for, what matters to them. And we're going to talk about that a lot in just a moment. But be conscious, it is not just a place for customers to learn about you. It is a place for you to learn about customers so that you can understand what's important to them and so that you can answer the questions that they have. And again, we're going to talk about that a lot in just a moment. Now, I mentioned that's mistake number one. There's a mistake number 1A that we need to talk about, which is you don't have an email list. You know, I talked about the hub and spoke. The hub isn't just your website. It is also your email list. It is also a way to reach customers directly in their inbox. Now, your email list could also include mobile phone numbers, so you can do text message marketing. It could include social media handles, so you can message them directly on social media because they've messaged you. We're not just spamming people. They've said, I want to talk to you this way. And you're using that information the same way. Along with your website, your email is your most important owned channel. We know that about 3/4 of customers check email on mobile. We know that it is used by all generations. About half of all millennials, or as I like to call them, adults approaching 40, still use email heavily. And it gives us a great way to put the right message, the right offer in front of customers at the right time to connect with them where and when they need it. The reason this matters is because the first rule of email marketing, and frankly of all direct marketing, whether you're doing email, whether you're doing text messages, whether you're doing postal mail, is without a list, you have no one to market to. We cannot connect with our customers if we don't have a way to reach them. So we always want to be building our list. There's all of these elements that we know play into a successful email marketing program. And the biggest one by far is, do you have the right list? About 40% of the value of your email marketing comes from having a good list. And I'll give you a reason why that's so. Imagine I'm selling a specific product and service, and I'm selling something. I'm a musician. I like playing music and the like, and I've been a musician for about 30 years. And if somebody were to send me an offer for a guitar, I would think that was pretty cool. I'd be interested in that. Even if I'm not ready to buy a guitar, even if it wasn't necessarily the coolest guitar, I might be interested in that. But if you're not a guitar player and somebody sends you a message about a guitar, you're probably likely to say, well, that's just spam. That's not valuable to me. It is more important to send, it is better to send a bad message to the right person than to send a great message to the wrong person, because we know the wrong person is never going to buy. So you want to think about, how are we building a list? How are we getting the right list so that we can reach people with the right message? Then we worry about things like, do we have a good subject line? Do we engage them and want them to open that email and learn more about it? And then we get into things like the message and the offer and the rest. But if you don't have a list, you have no one to market to. Much like a website, if you don't have one, there's some great tools out there: MailChimp, Sendinblue, Drip, HubSpot. There are plenty of others. Constant Contact is well regarded. Emma is a good one. They all have various pros and cons. What I would certainly pay attention to is, do they integrate with your website? So if you're on WordPress, these do. Drip doesn't really. Do they integrate with your shopping cart if you're doing e-commerce? Sendinblue, Drip, and HubSpot do. MailChimp kind of does, but think about that. Do they all have form builders? And are they priced both for where you are today and also where you're going to be in the long term? Don't just look at what you're going to cost you today. Look at, as your business scales and as your business grows, do they actually help you grow with them in a way that makes sense for you? Are there any questions about any of that before we move forward?
Hey, Tim, this is Margaret. I let everyone in the chat know that I would be monitoring the Q&A for you today.
Perfect.
And we did have a question come in. Someone who has been looking for someone to design the part of their website that involves that online e-commerce. And they're asking where they can identify people with the skill sets to know the ins and outs of e-commerce, shopping carts, payments, catalogs, etc.
Sure. So first and foremost, I would suggest check with the New Jersey Small Business Development Center. They may be able to connect you with people who have those specific skills. I also am a fan of Upwork. Upwork is an online service that can put you in touch with people. Just make sure you're aware first. Do your research. It's really important to write a quality brief that details exactly what skills you're looking for and exactly what your needs are. So for instance, if let's say that you are using Shopify and you're using Drip as your email platform and Shopify for your website, you would want to make sure that you're not looking for someone to build you an e-commerce website. You want to ask them that you're looking for somebody who has built websites in Shopify and has integrated those with Drip, and that they have examples that they can show you of having done that specifically. It doesn't mean that people who've worked with things like Shopify and like Drip can't do it. It means that you want to be clear that they have some experience, because sometimes the nuance matters and can make a big difference in how effective and how successful that's going to be. Okay.
That's great. We also had a comment, and I know you often address this, but someone mentioned businesses that don't have physical locations and how they can take advantage of their service areas.
Yeah, sure. So I actually have the same problem. I don't have a physical address. I don't have a physical address. I have a house, but but I don't have a physical address I use for my business. So yes, you can set up a Google My Business for that. However, rather than putting in a physical address, there's a slightly different process for it. What you do is you don't claim a physical location, you claim the areas you serve. So you're showing that, I serve Essex County, I serve Bergen County, I serve Monmouth County, or maybe you serve, the Northeast, or maybe you serve the entire East Coast, or maybe you serve the country. So you would put in, these are the areas that I specifically serve, and then people who are searching in those areas can find you because you are local to them. You understand their local area, but you are not claiming a physical address. Okay, so great question. Thank you for asking that. I should have pointed that out. But yes, you absolutely can do that. Okay. All right. So we've talked about a couple of mistakes already, 1 and 1A. Let's talk about mistake number 2. And this is probably the single biggest one that people who get the basics right miss, which is you don't know your customer. It's great if you have a website, and it's great if you have an email list. But if you're saying the wrong things to your customers, it's not going to work all that well for you. We need to be really clear about how we're helping our customers get their questions answered. In some ways, and I realize I've just spent the first 20 minutes talking about websites, but in some ways we put too much emphasis on the frame and not enough on the painting, not enough on what goes inside that frame, the content itself. And to do that, we have to know our customers well. So a quick framework that you should be aware, because we're going to talk about it a lot from this point forward, is there are really 3 things you want to keep in mind always. And the first of those is that content is, was, and always shall be king. We're going to talk much more about this in a little bit, so hang on to that thought for just a moment. But remember that content is king. Content is what does the job. If content is king, customer experience is queen. Customer experience helps customers decide whether you're the right option for them. And again, we're going to hang on to that one for just a minute, because again, we can't provide a good customer experience if we don't know who the customer is. Now, if we've got a king and we got a queen, we probably have some jewelry around here somewhere. And if content is king and customer experience is queen, then data is the crown jewels. And that's actually where I want to focus for the next couple of minutes, because we cannot know our customer without having good data. Now, fundamentally, understanding your customer is simple, right? Customers ultimately only ever really have 2 big questions. They've got a lot of little questions, but they only have 2 big ones. And the 2 big ones are, am I going to be satisfied when using your product or service, right? Are you a good fit for my needs? And if you're a good fit for my products or needs, there may be others like you too. So why should I buy from you? By the way, I'd really like to give a shout out to my brother-in-law for posing for this photo. I really, really appreciate it. Now,
I am so telling him.
All right. So maybe I shouldn't have said that on a recorded line. But realistically, those are the questions that they have. So you need to be thinking about, how do I understand the deeper questions that help them feel good about those answers? And there's a variety of data sources that are available to you. The first one is something called Google Analytics. Some of you may be familiar with it, but Google Analytics is something you set up on your website. And it's really pretty simple, because we think about your AABCs. By the way, this is true whether you use Google Analytics or any other analytics package. Think AABC. First set of questions, audience. Who is it that is coming to your website? What do we know about them in terms of their demographics, their interests, their geographic location? Are you talking to people local to you? Or are you talking about people all around the country or in another state? Are they coming to you on mobile, or are they coming to you on desktop? By the way, this is a hugely important question. Again, we know that half of all searches are conducted on mobile. We know that more than half of all web traffic occurs on mobile. So when you think about building your website, you have to think about it serving the needs of customers on mobile just as well as it does on desktop. And in fact, because mobile's so big, probably better. I do want to caution one bit of thinking that you may hear. There are people who refer to making your website mobile first. I disagree with that, not because mobile isn't critical, but because mobile is the tool. You want the website to be customer first, and mobile be one of the ways that we help the customer accomplish what they need. The other thing I would caution you or counsel you when you look at your data around mobile is you may say, well, I look at my data, I look at my website, and I only get 10% of my traffic from mobile, or I only get 5% of my traffic from mobile. And so I don't need a mobile website because my customers aren't using mobile. That may be misleading. That may actually be one of the very few cases, in business, you probably know this, that just because you build it doesn't guarantee that they come. What is also true when we talk about the mobile web is if you don't build it, I guarantee they won't come. So be aware that just because you have a mobile website or just because you're not getting mobile traffic, it may be a sign that your mobile website is actually really not great. So you want to pay close attention to that. And it is one where you probably need to invest in making the mobile website good and then see what kind of data you get. The other thing to be aware is WordPress, Shopify, some of the other good builders out there, Wix for website builders, do a really good job. Squarespace do a really good job of handling mobile right out of the gate. So do look for services. If you decide not to use a WordPress or not to use a Shopify, do make sure that they accommodate mobile really well. So that's our first A is audience. Our second A is acquisition. How did they get to us? Did they find us in a Google search? Did they find us on social media? Did they click on a link on someone else's website? You want to understand what marketing channels are working for you and driving business to your website so that you can continue to invest in those channels that work. We call that fish where the fishing's good. You know, I'm a kid from Newark. I don't know a lot about fishing, but I do know if there's a place where there's a fish, that's where you want to throw the line. If there's a place where there's no fish, stop, go somewhere else, right? So you want to think in terms of understanding how did customers find us so that we can understand where we want to keep fishing for more customers. Now, in addition to A and A, we got our B, and the B is behavior. Things like what did they do? One of the big ones is the landing page. What page on the website did they come into the website on? Was it your home page or was it a specific blog post? Was it a specific product page? That can tell you a lot about A, what messages are resonating with them, and B, what messages aren't. If you put up a great page about a product and nobody ever comes in on it or ever visits it on your site, that's a sign that you have a problem and need to make some changes there to improve how customers interact with that. Also, within most analytics tools, you can even see, did they complete some sort of conversion action from that page? And we will talk about that in a little bit. All right. So you want to think in those terms to say, is our message resonating? Are people finding the content that we want them to find? Are they finding the products and the services? And if not, what do we need to do to improve those? And I said that here's our two A's, here's our B. The last one, the C, is conversions. Did they accomplish their goal? We're going to talk much more about this in just a moment. But when somebody comes to our website, how do they know whether or not they bought? Did they put something in a shopping cart? Did they put it in a shopping cart and then leave? That tells you something's going on there. Did they put it in the shopping cart and buy? That tells you it worked. What if you have a restaurant? What if you have an accountancy? What if you have a law firm? What if you have a dentist office? Can they have something where they can make an appointment so that you can see what's working for them and see that it's actually connecting with them? If you're talking about something where you have a physical storefront and they have to come into the store to buy, you know, you can take it that you have to look at ways to measure that as well as conversions. For instance, can you give a specific phone number to see if they call, or a specific offer code that come into our store and we'll give you, you know, mention that you saw this on the website and we'll give you an extra value add on top of what you purchased. Notice I didn't say discount. We'll come to coupons in a minute, but a special offer on top of this. And that's a good way to test that they are actually converting from seeing the content on your website. Now, I mentioned fish where the fishing's good. Basically, we're always going to look at things where we're getting a lot of traffic, things where we're getting a lot of conversion. The all-stars, the top right corner, are things where you get a lot of traffic and get a lot of conversion. Great. You want to continue to invest in those. Fish where the fishing's good. Double down on them. If you get a lot of traffic, though, and you don't convert, and again, we'll get more into conversions in a minute, but if you get a lot of traffic and don't convert, then keep investing in testing in improving conversion actions. How do we get more conversions from these? We're going to talk about how you do that in just a second. If you're getting great conversions but not traffic, that's a place where you can look at doing some paid media and some paid promotion and frankly some free promotion, you know, through social media or things like that to drive more traffic to those. And of course, one of the most important things as a small business owner is making sure you're very clear about where you spend your time. It's not only important that you have a to-do list, make sure you have a to-don't list. If you have parts of your website that just don't get any traffic and just don't get any conversions, those are the sick dogs. Don't worry about them. Fish where the fishing's good, improve where you have the best opportunities to improve, and focus there. You can always come back to these later once business is humming where you want it to be. Any questions about any of that before I move forward?
Hey, Tim, we've had a couple of questions come in. There were two that came in about privacy restrictions and privacy settings and how all this that you were talking about with the reporting plays into all these new regulations.
Yeah, sure. So there are regulations about what personally identifiable information you can hold for people in Europe, people in Canada, people in South America, a number of South American countries, and people in California. Did I say California twice? Canada. There are quite a few around the globe, honestly. The big ones that you will run into, which may or may not be meaningful to your business, are the CPRA, the California Privacy Regulation Act, the GDPR, which is the the General Data Privacy Regulations for Europe, and the Canadian one, which I can't remember the acronym for right now. I beg your pardon. The point here is that the rules around the data. First of all, I must state out loud, I am not a lawyer. You should definitely get any information you need from credible, competent attorneys on this. But be aware that there are some laws around this. And if you are holding personally identifiable information, so name, address, phone number, email address, gender identity, marital status, any healthcare information, etc., there are rules that you should be aware to say whether or not you can actually store that data or what you need to do to store that data safely. The basic premise in all cases is it is privacy by default and privacy by design. What I mean by that is if the customer has not explicitly said you are allowed to use and hold that data, you're not allowed to use and hold that data. If the customer has said you are allowed to use and hold that data for this activity, you are only allowed to use and hold the data for that activity. You're not allowed to suddenly use it for new activities without getting them to explicitly opt into that. And they have the right later to opt out if they choose. Most of the credible platforms, actually, I should take that back. All of the credible platforms out there have good guidelines in terms of helping you work through this to make sure you're doing the right thing. And I also think ignore the laws for a second. And I don't mean ignore the law in terms of break the law. I mean, don't think in terms of, well, if it's legal, it's okay. Think in terms of, am I being a good steward of my customers' data? Right? If data is the crown jewels, it's so critically important. Treat your business as if protecting those mattered, because it does. Imagine if you held customer data and somebody leaked it to the world, or somebody came in and stole it. What would that do to your business? Nothing good. So we want to protect that very much like it is the crown jewels, because we're being good stewards of our customers' private information, right? So that's really key. Back on the legal side for 1 second, you may say, well, I'm operating in New Jersey. Why do I care about GDPR, or why do I care about California, right? Why do I care about Europe or California or Canada? It's because it doesn't matter where your business is. It matters where your customers are. So the laws don't apply to you. Remember, when we're talking e-commerce, when we're talking digital, your customer could be buying from you in California, or they could be buying from you in Canada, or they could be buying from you in Europe. So you need to be conscious of, if I have customers in these places, am I doing what I need to do for that specific jurisdiction? And am I being a good steward of my customer data anyway, regardless of where they live? Okay.
That's great, but we do have another question that came in about how someone can find customers with their email addresses or numbers to text. So we have sort of this opposing reality that they really want to know how to get the information and be able to contact people, but
oh yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second. The key is you have to ask them, right? And we're going to talk about how you ask them and how you make that work in just a moment. But the point is, yeah, you should totally ask them for that information. You just want to do it in the right way. Okay, so we're gonna look at how to do that in just a moment.
And the last thing I want to mention is that we have someone who is trying to increase sales of his or her book. So if you can keep that in mind when you have examples and things like that.
Perfect. So let's talk about that right now. Let's talk about how you sell more of something. And it's really simple. It's a very simple formula. V times CR times CLV equals dollars. What does that mean? It means visitors to your website, visitors to your web presence, times conversion rate, times customer lifetime value, meaning how much money we make per transaction and how many transactions we sell to the person over the course of the time they work with us, equals our revenue. And that's what we're looking for. So if you got something where you have a situation of we've got, I don't know, a couple of 1,000 people or 1,000 people coming to your website in any given period, right? And I want to be very clear. For some folks, 1,000 might be what you see in a month. For some of you, 1,000 might be what you see in a day. For some of you, 1,000 might be what you see in a year. It's all good. But you have 1,000 visitors to the web presence. They convert at a 5% conversion rate. The average volume of sales they do with you is $100. You're going to make $5,000 in revenue during this period, right? So what you want to do is you want to increase the number of visitors. If you go from 1,000 to 2,000, you go from 5 grand to 10 grand. If you improve your conversion rate, go from 5% to 10%, you go to 10 grand. If you increase the amount they spend with you from 100 to 200, you go to 10 grand. Or what we try to do is we try to increase all of these. They become force multipliers and we end up in a much better position. So how do we do this? Well, first, we have to understand what matters to our customers in the first place. So for our example of the person who's written a book, what is it about the book that they like? Customers share this information on social media. They share it with their friends and family and fans and followers. They write reviews. That data is all available to us. It's not the quantitative data that we saw with Google Analytics. It is qualitative to say what matters. So this is a tag cloud for a hotel client of mine where we saw they really liked the breakfast. They really liked the staff. They really liked the location. They thought it was a great place for couples. So what we did was we simply took the pages they were already going to on the website and we added photos of couples. We added photos of the staff delivering breakfast. And we saw a big increase in the amount of revenue, the amount of traffic that we got, and also a decline in negative reviews because we weren't talking about the things they didn't want, or we weren't talking about things that we didn't do a good job of. We were focusing on the areas where we were already strong, and we knew we were strong because the customers told us that. And I'm going to show you some tools you can use in just a moment to get this data. But that would be one of the things you want to look at. The next thing is you have to remember, I mentioned customer experience is queen. Here's why. You're all familiar with this woman who lives out in the world. You've probably heard of her, Kim Kardashian, right? And Kim Kardashian is an influencer. She says something about a business and that business's revenues go up, right? Well, kinda. If she said something about, a cosmetic product or a clothing line or things along those lines, that business's revenues would probably go up. But if Kim Kardashian talked about, I don't know, her favorite tax accountant or, her favorite business book, it might go up, but it might not because that audience isn't the people who, she's talking to. Influencers like a Kim Kardashian or any influencer are not as important to your business as their audience is. So you actually want people who are speaking to the people you want spoken to more than just do they have a big audience. Now, the people who have the right kind of audience are your existing customers. They are your secret sales force. Their reviews and testimonials tell a powerful story about your business and your brand. And they're going to tell people anyway. You know, Margaret, you and I have had this conversation before, but have you had a good experience with a business in the last year or so?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Did you tell anybody about it?
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe one or two.
probably, just a handful.
Just a handful. Okay. Did you have a bad experience with a business in the last year or two?
Yes.
Who'd you tell about it?
Who didn't I tell about it? I
Right.
shouted it from the rooftops.
You tell everybody, right? That's the way life works. If you have a good experience, you might tell a couple people. If you have a bad experience, you tell everybody you meet forever. That's why customer experience is queen. I just told you about a terrible experience that I had with a restaurant this past week, right? So we want to help our customers. We want to encourage them and involve them in creating and curating a positive brand story. So if we have a situation where you have, 260 customers, one customer a day times 5 days a week for a 52-week year, that's 260 customers who come to you. On average, those customers have about 200 of friends, friends and family and fans and followers on Facebook, about 200. This, by the way, is true. If you're in B2B, the same is true on LinkedIn. They've got about 200 connections there. That means that if they say something good or bad about you, that's a potential audience of 52,000 people. Now, let's be very fair. A, we only want them to say the good stuff. And B, we know that not everybody will. So let's say only 1% do. That's 520 people you can reach as opposed to 52,000 people. But that's 520. If 5% of those people convert, that's 26 additional conversions. That's a 10% increase in your sales each year just from getting 1% of people to say something good about you to their social networks. That's why customer experience is queen. That's why your customers are your secret sales force. That's why they're the influencers you care about the most. Now, I mentioned there are some social listening tools. I don't want to spend too much time on this because we're running a little short of time here, but these are some various tools you can look at to understand what our customers saying about you on social. They have decent pricing in all cases, and usually almost all of them start at a low price that you can start and then scale up as you go. Okay. All right. The last mistake we want to talk about, your content doesn't help your customers buy. I mentioned before that content is king. Your content is your 24/7 by 365 salesperson. It is your 24/7 by 365 customer support person. If I told you you could create one piece of content and that one piece of content was going to cost you $1,000, and that piece of content was going to sell for you 24 hours back. Actually, forget about a piece of content. If I told you you're going to hire a salesperson and that salesperson is going to sell for you for 24 hours a day, for 7 days a week, for 365 days out of the year, it's going to do this for 2 or 3 years, and you're going to pay them $1,000 one time to do it. You'd say, where do I sign up? That's what your content is. Think about it as a salesperson. Content is cheap. Content that doesn't sell is expensive. So you want to make sure your content sells, and your content sells when it helps your customers answer their questions and does so quickly. Mark Benioff, who's the chairman of Salesforce.com, has said speed is the new currency of business. Or as I like to say it, instant gratification isn't fast enough. People are busy. I'm sure some of you are doing things right now because you got more things to do in the course of the day than you have time to do them. So your content has to help people answer their questions quickly and then get on with life. We know what people are looking for. There's been, in the last year, a 3,000% increase in searches for curbside pickup. There's been an 800% growth in searches for in stock. There's been an 80% growth in searches for local businesses. 71% of consumers want to buy from companies that align with their value. And there's been a 50% growth in searches for discount code. People are telling us what they need. All we have to do is actually make it happen for them. Notice curbside pickup, in stock, local businesses. Notice, look when I go to Walmart.com, big business, but what do they have right on the homepage? Some of the most valuable real estate in the world. Pick up and delivery, curbside pickup. How did they know that? They looked at what their customers were searching for and said, we're going to make this really, really interested into, really, really available to them quickly, get them to what they want and let them get on with the rest of their day. Now, you have to think about your customers' questions. This is the #1 thing you want to talk about. Think about your customers' questions and then answer them in your content. Think about things like, where are you located? What are your hours? Do you have what I want? What does it cost? Where can I get it? Is it easy to use? Will it fit? Can I return it? What happens if I'm not satisfied? Who else likes it? And all of those things. They're asking, do I trust you? For our friends who are an accountant, that, obviously they're still going to say, where are you located? What are your hours? Do you meet my needs? Why should I trust you? What happens if I'm not satisfied with the results? Think about the questions people ask you when you talk to your existing customers today and make sure that that content exists on your website to answer their questions. We can use search data, so Google Trends or Google Search Console, to see what questions people ask and where gaps exist, where there's questions customers are asking that you don't have content for. Make sure you create some content. There are other tools out there. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but there are tools like SEMrush, Ahrefs, Moz, the Google AdWords keyword tool, etc. All allow you to find the kinds of questions customers ask. You can check them out. You can figure out what kinds of questions customers care about for your information, and then build out the content on your website to get them to convert. Now, we mentioned a minute ago, how do you sell the book, or how do you get people to sign up, and how do you get their email and things like that? Well, first, you have to use a clear call to action. What do you want them to do? Add to cart or buy with PayPal? Real quick, real simple, nice big buttons here, make it easy. Give them a benefit, give them a second benefit, and then ask for the sale. Give them a call to action. What do you want to do, right? You have to think about the things that we need. First, how big is the button? Notice, this is something I love about this page. I'm a big fan of this page. On this page specifically, you can tell this is what they most want you to do because it's the biggest thing on the page. This is secondary, it's a little smaller. These are tertiary, they're smaller still. This is quaternary, is that a word? It's the fourth most important, it's smaller still. We're making it really easy for people to see what we want them to do. We look at placement. Where do we put things on the page? We're all Americans here. We all live in the USA of A. We read from the top left to the bottom right, and our eye tends to move diagonally across the page. Put the most important thing in the top right. That's how we read. If you put the most important thing in the top left, I beg your pardon. I forgot to look at the letters on my shoe this morning. But if you put things on the top right, people aren't going to see it because it's not where we've been trained our entire lives to look. Think about testing various verbiage. Is it add to cart? Is it buy now? Is it learn more? Is it act now? Is it talk to a salesperson? Is it give us a call? What are the message you're using there to get them to connect? Think about various styles. Are we just doing a link? Are we doing a link in a body of text, or are we doing a button? Which of those works? And test color. There are some colors that work really well: red, orange, bright, high contrast, because it has to be usable by people who have physical disabilities. Don't make it hard for people to read. But we know things like grays and low contrast, very hard for people to see, very hard for people to click, makes it very tough for them to actually do what you want them to do. You can also offer scheduling forms to make it convenient if you have a business where people come to you. So for our friend, the accountant, they could schedule an appointment with you to actually have you walk through an initial engagement. A restaurant, make a reservation online. These are conversion actions. For collecting email addresses, give them a lead form. Are you on our list? Give them some reason to connect with you and give you their email address. I like this one. I don't want to knock this one. I think they do a good job. What I think they could do better is they say, we only send one newsletter a week. It's everything you want to know about your favorite boutique. Well, that's great, but why is it worth it to me to give you my email address? The answer is sometimes we want to do something called a lead magnet. We want to give them something in exchange for providing that information. So subscribe to our newsletter, get a $10 coupon. Okay, that's a good idea. I'm sure the folks here at this photography company have undoubtedly done the math to say, you know what, people who come to us on their first purchase, they spend $100 or we make $100 profit. It's worth it to us to pay $10 for an email address. In other businesses, you might say a different value added offer as opposed to just giving a discount. When you think about things like contact forms, how do you do it right? Well, you have to do a couple of things. Make it easy to find. We've got a connect button on every page of this website. Give people a physical address and map where appropriate. Give them a phone number. It's incredible. If I'm on a mobile device, I don't know if you know this, this is crazy. These things make phone calls. The other night when I was trying to get in touch with that restaurant, I couldn't find a phone number anywhere on the website. If I could have just called them, I might have been able to order from them. Instead, I gave up and got a pizza. Make it easy for them to connect with you the way that they want to connect. Don't ask for too much information up front. So to our friend before who was asking about how do we get email addresses, think about it in terms of if you're on a date. And if you were on a date with somebody and the first thing you said to them was, hey, great to meet you. Tell me everything about you. How tall are you? How much do you weigh? Do you have kids? Do you want to have kids? Do you want to get married? You know, how much money do you make? What would happen? They would recoil in horror. They would excuse themselves to go to the restroom and they would climb out the bathroom window, right? So think about your forms the same way. Are we asking for the least amount of information necessary to conclude this part of our date? And we can always ask them for more information later. So, you know, I need your first name, your last name, or your email address. Maybe I just need your email address. Give them a big, bold button. Just make it really clear what I want you to do. Click this button. And I love this. They also link to the privacy policy. How can I trust you? Well, I'm going to show you right here. Here's the privacy policy that says, what am I going to do with this information? And I'm only going to use it the way you've said it's okay for me to use. Another great form of content is having great images. We know that online, pretty pictures sell product. So make sure you've got big, bold, beautiful images. We see it all across the web everywhere. Incredibly, incredibly important. Think in terms of testimonials. They inspire trust. Here's a testimonial of somebody talking about my business. But even I get this wrong sometimes. I know it's shocking that I could make a mistake, but it happens. We got this great testimonial, but look what's missing. I got a testimonial. Where's the call to action? We've just told customers, hey, this is a great opportunity. You can trust us. People say great things about us. How about asking for a sale? So just think in terms of always turning any of those conversations into an opportunity to sell, to convert. And sell could be, you know, give us an email address. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to get married on the very first date. It could just be, do you want to have a second date? So think in those terms. I mentioned a moment ago, I want to do this real quick because we're running short of time, but we know that price is a common conversion lever. We tell people, here's a 10% discount, here's $10 off, here's whatever. I would encourage you to think differently about it, not because it doesn't work, but because in a world where customers can see all the prices for everything they're looking at, you might just be giving away free money you don't need to. Instead, think about how you can think about A, can you claim that you're the lowest price? And B, do you really want to race to zero? Think instead about how you can give more value for the price that they pay and get them to want it because they're getting more as opposed to spending less. The last thing to be aware is it's not that necessary. Notice 3,000% increase for searches for curbside pickup, 800% growth in searches for in stock, 80% growth for searches in local businesses, 71% of consumers want to buy from companies that align with their value, and a 50% growth in searches for discount code. Now, 50% is a lot, but it's a lot less than any of the rest of these. All of these are more important. Curbside pickup is 6 times more important. I beg your pardon. I did the math wrong. It is 60 times more important. They're telling you this is what we care about. It'd be nice if we got a discount, but maybe I can say, well, for our friend who's selling the book, maybe you say, order the book, and if you act now, and I will send you a signed copy, or pay an extra $10 and I'll send you a signed copy, or pay an extra $2 or something along those lines, and I will do a 10-minute call with you or ask your questions. Think about ways you can do value adds, come to an exclusive reading. So think about how you want to look at that. Okay, so remember, website and email, you got to have them. Big mistakes if you don't. You really want to think hub and spoke and have that right at the center of everything you do. Remember that customers are always asking, why should I buy from you? Why should I trust you? Think about the fact that content is, was, and always shall be king. Think about the fact that customer experience is queen and that data is the crown jewels. Make sure you ask for the sale in everything that you do. And if we do this really, really well, you can make enough money to take your whole team and go get a pizza. Now, I realize we've covered a lot of information really fast. I do want to point out in the slides you will get, there are some additional resources, so feel free to check those out. But with that, I really appreciate your time and attention. I know we're at the top of the hour, but I'm happy to stick around and answer another question or two if you have any.
There was one remaining question in the question box, and I suppose it is an area that people could get caught up in making a quote unquote mistake. What's the typical budget of that you can expect to allocate toward marketing, website, e-commerce in their first year?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for established businesses, and I realize that's not the question you asked. I'm going to come to this quickly, I promise. But for established businesses, it varies widely based on the kind of business you're in. So if you're in a, let's say you're in you're a house builder, right? Building a house, you make an awful lot of money on the building of the house. And so your budget might only be 5% of sales, right? Might only be 5% of revenue. If you're in a very competitive market where there's lots and lots of competition, very mature industry, low profit margins, your marketing budget could be 30%, 40% of sales every year. What I would suggest instead when you're starting out is say, what can I afford to test, right? Assume that you're going to try to get to a target of around 5 to 20%, but test small and then invest in the areas that work and scale from there. Okay. But it's a very tough question to answer because, again, people building houses, people selling a book as a, for instance, the margins on a book aren't terribly high. What you have to spend to get that sale is a little harder and a little higher as a percentage. Okay.
Awesome. So thank you again, Tim, for a wonderful presentation. I don't think there's a few more questions, but we are a little over the time. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to give you a link right after this. But next week, we have Arash. He's going to show us supplier development for small businesses in the age of COVID-19. So if you deal with suppliers, any type of suppliers, this is for you. So here's where you would request for counseling. So again, any other questions that you have, whether it be funding, e-commerce, suppliers, etc., anything small business, njsbdc.com/request-counseling. So that is it for today. We'll see everyone next week. Thanks again, Tim. Thank you, Margaret. Until next time, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.